Good morning. Before we get started, we have a little problem that we need to fix. And the problem is that the vibe of our session is, what we're going for is intimate. And what we haven't got right now is intimacy, because there are a ton of empty seats up front here. We're going to be doing lots and lots of question and answer stuff. We're going to be getting you doing activities and exercises. And the closer you are to the front, the better it is for everyone. So can we spend the next minute emptying out from the back and having 0 empty seats up front? Let's do this in 1 minute. Up you come.
You paint a picture in my mind. No te quiero perder. Que la distancia se devore nuestra miel.
Morning. Morning.
Y perdamos la
How are we doing?
fe.
All right, almost there. Come as close as you can to the front. No empty seats in the front. As close as you can. There's seats down here, there's seats here, there's seats over here.
Me duele hasta la piel. Dentro de mí.
All right.
Semillas tengo de ti.
We can see you cool kids at the back not moving. That's not cool.
Pueden querer morir.
That's right. All right, 20 more seconds. Let's get this done. 20 more seconds. Find a seat. Get as close to the front.
Sacar de adentro mil cosas que te quiero decir. Me siento tan débil sin ti. Quiero guardar.
All right. Ready? Okay. Hello. Hi. How are you doing? Good morning so far? Great stuff. Okay, I'm Dan. This is my business partner, Gareth. We represent 50% of our entire company. There's a picture of us on the leaflet that you've got there. And we're very, very happy to be here. Thank you for having us. Gareth and I are really good friends. We've known each other for many, many years. And our paths here today have been very similar and also very different at different times. Right now, we have our own business, the Rise Group. But before that, we worked in an innovation consulting company called What If, who were charged with helping people invent stuff. And that's what we did for many, many years. That's where we met. We both moved to New York as single dudes about 8 or 9 years ago. We barely knew each other then. We worked in the same company, but we weren't really friends. We both moved from London to New York. We bumped into each other in this same company. I didn't know you were going to New York. I didn't know you were going to New York, but there we were. We both met and married local American women. And now we have American kids, and we're here to stay. So this is our life now. We live in New York City, which is a very exciting place to be. And about 3 years ago, we decided that we would like to start our own company, the Rise Group. And we do exactly what was shared with you by Gary earlier. Now, another way of thinking about what we do is that we work on attitudes, skills, and behaviors. Because ultimately, when you want to create a great company culture, it comes down to how people behave. It comes down to how people act and interact with each other. And there are companies up here that are very diverse. We work with Disney. Everyone knows what Disney does. We also work with Illumina. Some of you may or may not have heard of Illumina. Illumina are changing the world of healthcare by making amazing breakthroughs in DNA sequencing. They are a truly inspiring company. But whether we're talking to Disney about parks and attractions, or whether we're talking to Illumina and to scientists and engineers about DNA sequencing, when it comes down to culture and being creative and being innovative, there is a simple human truth that it's all the same stuff. It's all the same thing, no matter what business you work in. So what we're going to be sharing with you now is exactly the kind of things we share with those guys.
But before we get started, we want to make sure that you're sort of warmed up, and we're going to do that with a bit of interactivity, and it's a quiz about our favorite topic, us. Okay, so some questions, and what's going to happen is, and can you hear me at the back okay? Yeah? I'll keep shouting loudly whilst we work out the mic. So what's going to happen is I'm going to ask you some questions about Dan, and I want you to shout out what you think the answer is, okay? So take a good look at Dan over here. Look him up.
Hi.
Look him down. Okay, and what kind of car?
Prius.
Are you kidding?
Prius might be one of them. Prius might be one of them. What else? What other kind of cars do you think Dan drives? Volkswagen down here.
Mazda.
Mazda over there. What else?
Volvo.
A potato truck with his rustic look over here. Okay.
A bicycle down here.
Bicycle down there. A bicycle.
All right, well, hold on. Let's switch it up. Okay, let's switch it up. What about Gareth? Prius. We're both Prius drivers. Okay, what else have we got? Honda. Did I hear Honda?
I had a Ferrari.
Did you have Ferrari, or you just making that up? Okay, all right. So we get the picture. We see how you see us. It's not groovy. Okay, let's change the question. All right, the next question is, start with Gareth this time. What's his favorite food? Chipotle. Seafood. Fish and chips. Of course, fish and chips.
Okay, what about Dan? Have a good look at Dan. What does Dan love to eat?
Salad.
Chicken and salad. Just salad down here. Anyone? What about from this side of the room over here? Pizza over there.
What was that? Someone said Doritos. Okay. All right. We get it. I am a salad-eating Prius driver. This is awesome. This is what you think of British guys.
I like the potato truck more.
Okay.
Last one.
You do this one. Yeah. All right.
Let's stay with Dan. Take a good look at Dan and think about what does his dad do or did do for a living? Who would be his father? What do you think? What?
What did he say?
What was it again? A dictator. Yeah. Who knows? Or what? An accountant down here. An accountant or a dictator. Interesting spectrum of career choices.
Surgeon.
Surgeon, a lumberjack.
Surgeon and lumberjack. Both good with their hands.
Very good.
All right, okay. And what about Gareth? Finally, we'll close this quiz out now. What was that?
Russell Brand.
He died in the fire.
He died in a fire.
That's not a job.
He's a ghost. He's a full-time
He's a professional fire dyer. A lawyer. We have lawyer over there. Anything over here? A what? He's a hobo. All right. Okay. We'll stop there.
Now, we're not going to give you the answers just yet. We're going to return to the answers during our presentation. And when you hear the correct answers, you are going to be disappointed. Okay, so just to manage your expectations, about halfway through this presentation, you will be disappointed when we reveal the real answers. But we'll explain in a little bit why we did that quiz just then. Now, as you heard, our topic for this conversation over the next hour is about unlocking your inner entrepreneur. So by a show of hands, who would love to have their own business later on in life? Yeah, so some people in the room. So it doesn't matter whether you are working for yourself or working for someone else. What we're really talking about is the spirit, the mindset of being entrepreneurial. You know, and when you're being entrepreneurial, it's all about adding value to the work that you're doing. It's about working smarter. It's about working more creatively. This is what we're going to cover off. This is effectively our agenda for the next hour. There's 9 things we're going to talk about. There's question the question, ask how and why, pick words wisely, ask where else, ask what if, embrace constraints, keep moving, behave brilliantly. That means nothing to you guys right now. But I promise you, by the end of this hour, all of it will make a lot of sense. And everything we share with you has been tried and tested with our clients. We know this stuff works. We know it can add a value to the work that you do.
So it's going to be a bit fast. It's going to be a bit of a romp. Are you up for that? Yeah. All right. Okay. So A lot of this is grounded in innovation because you can't really talk about entrepreneurs without talking about innovation. Most entrepreneurs become entrepreneurs because either they innovate around a product or a service, or they simply run their business innovatively. That's the name of the game. So we want you to start thinking about innovation right now, and we're going to start by asking you this question. And this is not a shout out, this is just something to think about, and then you're going to share with a friend. What is your favorite innovation? That's what we want you to think about. This could be something big and impressive and technology-driven that's out there in the world and is changing the planet and doing social good. It could be something big like that. It could be something small and everyday, a product or a service that you use that just makes your life a bit easier or a bit more interesting. So we don't mind if it's big or small. We don't mind if it impacts your life or it just impacts the world. But we'd love you to think about that. And when you've got an idea of your favorite innovation, just share it amongst the people you are sitting with. And we're going to give you 1 minute to have that conversation. Off you go.
Hello.
All right. I'm going to pause there. Now, we're not going to hear these. We want to think about them from one particular angle. And the angle is the angle of questions. Because whatever innovation you were thinking of, it is a beautiful, elegant answer to a really important question. And that's what we want to focus on. We want to focus on those questions. And in a moment, we're going to get you to think about what was the big question that led to this innovation. As an example, this question here was asked recently, led to a multi-billion-dollar business. Anyone guess what business came from this question? Airbnb. Airbnb. Hands up if you've ever stayed in an Airbnb. Handful of people. Hands up if you know what Airbnb is. Okay, for those of you who don't know, it's basically a business where anyone who owns a home or an apartment can rent it out to other people. It's an amazing platform, and it has completely disrupted the hotel industry. Here's another question. What if the taxi came to you instantly? Uber. So you see, we've simplified these questions. We don't know if that's exactly how the founders asked the question. And obviously, to create those businesses, they asked and answered many, many questions along the way. But these were the big ones. So using this as an example, we'd like you to go back to your conversations and have a think about what do you think the big question was that led to your favorite innovation. You're going to chat about that for about 30 seconds. And then we're going to hear from you. We're going to hear the question, and the rest of us are going to try and guess what the innovation was. Over to you.
I'll have a mic out.
Okay. Gareth is now going to be the roving reporter, moving amongst you to find people who want to share the question. You'll share the question, and then we'll all have a guess. So let's have some volunteers. Gareth will go and find you. We've got time for 3 or 4 of these. Over here.
Okay, first victim, over here. So don't tell us what it is, just the question, and we'll try and guess.
What is something that would make someone smile in the morning and wake them up?
Something that would make you smile in the morning and wake you up. What was the innovation that came from that? Guesses? Coffee?
Coffee?
Coffee? It's coffee. Well done. Brilliant.
Well
Thank
done,
you
well
very
done.
much. All right, let's have another one.
He's got a hand. Oh,
Down at the front here, G. Down at the front.
How can we encourage literacy?
How can we encourage literacy? Teachers? Kindle Fire? E-books? What else? English? Reading? The printing press? What was the answer?
The Gutenberg printing press.
The Gutenberg printing press. Well
Awesome,
done. Thank you
awesome.
very
Okay, I'm going
much.
to come around here.
Let's have these guys are desperate to share.
Desperate. Okay.
Wait, how would you get clean water to people that don't have it?
How do you get clean water to people that don't have it?
Okay, what do you think?
Sewage systems,
Wells,
water bottles,
aqueducts over here.
aqueducts, and the answer is?
Actually, I don't know what it's called, but it's a device that allows people to have like a portable filter that can drink muddy water, and it filters out the mud and gets it clean water to everyone.
Portable water filters. Thank you very much. All right, we'll pause there. Thank you very much. Give yourselves a quick round of applause. Okay. This allows us to start getting into the importance of questions. And entrepreneurs are brilliant at asking and answering the right questions. I think what's interesting is how one person's question created lots of possible different answers. I think that just goes to show you how the right question can stimulate not one idea, but many ideas. And this has happened throughout time. Throughout history, people have asked really important questions that have changed the way the world works. For example, this question. How can we carry a cow in our pocket? You know, right?
A hamburger.
By creating currency. Now, before currency, trade was a tricky business because people had to carry their tradable goods to a marketplace. And then they had to barter. And you have to work out in that process how many horse are worth 3 chicken. That's difficult. And then when it comes to paying people, there were issues as well. Here you are, Dave. 1.5 sheep. What's this? It's your bonus, annual bonus, Dave. You've done really well. 1.5 sheep. What am I going to do with half a sheep? Well, I don't know. It's just what you earn. You earn one. Well, can I have the equivalent of half a sheep in other animals? I mean, can I get 4 duck? I don't know. I don't know if 4 duck are worth half a sheep, Dave. Just take your 1.5 sheep and be happy. Okay. You know, if only we had currency, Dave. I know. Right? So, the right question changes everything. How do you persuade customers to buy more than they can carry? Exactly. Online shopping. The first person to answer this was a man called William H. Dubner, a shopkeeper in St. Paul, Minnesota, who noticed that people were only buying as much as they could carry. So, well, if I gave them something to carry stuff in, they would buy more. Not only did they spend more in his store, he also made a fortune selling the bags themselves. And then there's this one. How can I make it easier for people to eat these sausages? Anton Feuchtwanger, a German sausage maker living in the American Midwest at the turn of the 20th century, invented the hot dog bun. The hot dog bun. Necessity being the mother of invention, he was solving a problem. This was the problem he had. He would make these beautiful sausages, he would cook them up, and he would give them to people, he would sell them to people, and they were hot. So to stop them burning their fingers, he'd give them these beautiful white gloves. These white gloves were really nice, so people kept them, which destroyed all his profits. So I have to have another way for people to hold these sausages, and the hot dog bun was born. So these are just some fun examples that show us the power of asking a really important question.
So what entrepreneurs are really good at is not just asking any old questions, they're asking really good questions. So the first thing we want to talk about is how they do that. And it really is important to question the question. Because this sounds easy, but it can be really difficult because of something we refer to as the right question assumption. As human beings, we love to be busy. And we love to get going fast. Someone will give us a question, and instantly we will turn that into an action. Now, to bring to life the mishaps that can happen if you act too quickly, if you take the wrong question, I'm going to tell you a true story, but with an apocryphal twist. So this story comes from the world of NASA. So cast your mind back to when there was the space race. And the Americans said, we're going to put a man on the moon. The Russians were like, no, we're going to get there first. So there was this competition to see who can be the first person to put a man on the moon. Now, when it comes to innovation, you can imagine there were so many innovation projects that spun out of this very simple, or very complex, I should say, challenge of putting a man on the moon. Now, how are we going to get them there? How are we going to drive around once we get there? What are we going to give people to wear? How are they going to eat ice cream up in space? All these essential things. And one thing they realized very early on in the process was that Earth pens didn't work. There was no gravity to pull the ink down. So they decided that one of their projects that they wanted to work on was this. How can we develop a pen that writes in space? And NASA put that challenge out to loads of different companies, and Fisher Industries in Boulder, Colorado won the contract, and they developed this, the Space Pen. This pen is awesome. This pen can write in freezing cold temperatures, freezing hot temperatures. It can write underwater, just in case you ever need that. You can bang it into wood, pull it out, and it will still work. And because of the way it's been engineered, you can use it in zero gravity. This pen is amazing. It was also incredibly expensive. Now, we all know how the space race played out in America. Landed the man on the moon with Neil Armstrong. And fast forward a few years, and space exploration suddenly becomes something that's for the benefit of mankind rather than one country. And countries started to collaborate and share how they did things. And I have no idea if this took place, but I like to imagine there was a field trip by the cosmonauts who came and looked around sort of Cape Canaveral to see how the astronauts had done it. And the astronauts were obviously pretty proud because they'd put a man on the moon. And they're like, wow, this here is our space buggy. And the Russians were like, oh, we never got to drive our space buggy on the moon. No, this is our suits. And they're like, oh, white is so much nicer than orange. And then they were like, this is our space pen. And the Russians, they looked down, they heavy sigh, and they said, oh, they made us take pencils. Funnily enough, a pencil also works in zero gravity over there. So what's interesting is that when you think about it, this was the challenge that the Americans had. We need a pen that writes in space. If that is the question, how can we get a pen that writes in space? What is the answer always going to be? It's always going to be a pen. It's always going to be a pen. The Russians asked a slightly different question. How can we develop something that writes in space? If that was the question you were asking, the answer could be a pen. It could also be a pencil. What else could it be? A marker, chalk, crayons. There's tons of stuff. But then ladder it up even broader, something to record information in space. Now suddenly we've got computers, video cameras, pens, pencils, chalk, everything we've talked about. So making sure that we're interrogating the question and that it is the right question can save us a lot of time and a lot of money. Because if you ask the wrong question, you might end up with a very expensive space pen as an answer to your challenge when you could have just spent a few cents and bought a pencil instead.
So we see how important it is to get it right. How do you do it? What's one of the best ways of questioning the question, taking a step back, and nailing it? Well, asking how and asking why are two very, very good techniques. And a story from the motor industry really brings to life the power of asking how and why. Henry Ford was a very successful car maker, and everything he did came down to one question. How can I produce the least expensive car in the world? And when you ask a question like that, you set off a chain of thinking. Every idea, every strategy, every tactic, every move you make has to deliver the cheapest car in the world. That was considered highly revolutionary in and of itself for a luxury goods strategy. He went for lower margins and higher volume, and most people weren't playing that kind of game. And he did really well. Between 1909 and 1927, 15 million Ford Model Ts rolled off the production line. Now, if you had asked him, Mr. Ford, why Why do you want to produce the least expensive car in the world? He would have probably said, because I want to sell a lot of cars. That was his ultimate goal. That was his big question. How can I sell a lot of cars? Someone else wanted to sell a lot of cars. This guy, William Durant, CEO of GM at around the same time. He took that question and asked, how could I do it? How could I do it without producing the least expensive car in the world? And he came at it like this. Well, I'm going to do it by making owning a car affordable. An entirely different question, all grounded in the same big goal. And as a consequence of asking this question, his mind was open to other ideas. And one big, powerful idea he had was to open GMAC Financing, General Motors Acceptance Corporation, in 1919. He basically created a credit company that made it easier for people to buy his cars. And even though his cars were bigger and fancier and more expensive, by asking a different question, he eventually performed at the same level as the Ford Motor Company. Neither men asked the wrong question. Both men were trying to answer the same question. How do I sell a lot of cars? But by asking how and why, they came at it from very different angles. So you're going to have a play with this now. We are going to work on your own little challenge. You'll need a starter challenge to work on this, something personal to work on, just to have an explore of what happens if we ask how and why. My starter challenge is this. How do I make more time for reading books? Now, you're probably thinking that we created that because you're students, but it's not the case. It's a real challenge that I have in life. I really never get around to reading books. I read articles, I read magazines, I read stuff online, I write. I have no problem with words and taking in information, but when it comes to books, it just falls off. It falls off my list of things to do, and I never get it done. So that's my challenge. We'd like you to think of a challenge that's similarly personal. Could be, how can I make more time for a particular hobby? How can I spend more time with my friends or family? How can I master a particular skill? How can I work out more? It doesn't matter what it is, but we'd like you to think of something that's a personal challenge that you would like to have some fresh ideas around and think about in a new and different way. We're going to give you 30 seconds to think of something, and when you've got something, you can share it with the people around you. Over to you. Okay, don't worry if you couldn't think of anything. I'm sure that someone around you has thought of something, and you'll all get a little play with this right now. What we're going to do is ask how and why of your own personal challenge. So if we take my challenge, for example, and we ask me, which we can do because I'm here, why? Why, Dan, do you want to make more time for reading books? What might that answer be? Why might I want to make more time for reading books? Because I like to read books and I'm missing out on something I'm passionate about? Yep. What else? Sorry? To learn more. That could be it. I want to learn more, and I think books are the key to learning more. What else could it be? To expand my vocabulary. Nice. Yeah. Could be lots of things, couldn't it? Yes. To give me new perspectives. Thank you. To give me new perspectives. There will always be lots of reasons why you are asking the questions you are asking. You are facing the challenges you are facing. And there's no right or wrong here. It's just important to have a bit of a play around with it. It could be this. I just want to look more interesting at cocktail parties. You know what I was reading the other day? Oh, I was reading this. What about you? Right? It could be that. Who knows? The point here is just to figure out, where are my questions coming from? Now, let's assume it is the right question. That is the right question. It's not about looking interesting at cocktail parties. It is about reading books. We're going to ask how. And when we ask how could I actually do that? There's lots of different ideas. I could learn to speed read. I could make better choices so that I'm more likely to stick to a book. I could stop doing something that takes up a lot of my time, like watching sport. Now, there's lots of different things I could do. The point here is that when you ask how and why, you're giving yourself a better chance at nailing the right question for you. You might be asking the right question, but by playing around with it, you give yourself a chance to figure out, is it the right question, or is there a better question out there? So we're going to give this a go now on your challenges. You're going to take your challenge. Mine is make more time for reading books. And you're going to ask yourself of your challenge, why is this a challenge to me? Why do I want to do this thing? And see what's above it. See what bigger challenge lives up there. And then you're going to look at that original question and ask yourself, how? How could I actually do this? What ideas could I have that would enable me to answer this question that I've got? So going up and going down the funnel. That's what you're going to do. And remember, this is just about experimenting. You can write this stuff down. You can chat this stuff out. We're going to give you a minute to play around with it, and then we'll see how you get on. Over to you. It was about 35. Okie dokie dokes. So, here's the thing. You can't do this wrong. You cannot do this wrong. The point of this is stimulus. The point of this is exploration. Some of you will do this and you'll say, you know what? I've made my question bigger by asking why. I've made my question smaller by asking how. And the question I'm asking is the right question. It is the right question. Sometimes you'll do this and you'll say, you know what? I am asking the wrong question. One of our clients recently was convinced that her question was, how can I be more organized? She was convinced that that was her question. And all the ideas she was having were about systems and processes to be more organized. But when she played around with the question and worried less about the answer and more about the question, she took a step back and she realized that that wasn't really her challenge. Her challenge was figuring out what was important to her. That was the real issue, making decisions about priorities. Because the truth was, she was pretty organized. She knew how to get stuff done. She just wasn't getting it done because she hadn't got her priorities straight. When we do this with our clients, sometimes we circle back to the original question and they go, thanks for the exploration. We're sticking with the question that we started with. Other times, they'll say, you know what, there's a better question out here. So the point is not to get it right or wrong. The point is to have confidence that you've taken a step back, you've given it some thought, and then when you move forwards with a question, you know it's the right one. So that's how and why. It's very easy. You can't get it wrong. It's just about experimenting with other questions.
So let's mix things up. We're going to move on to our next one on the wheel. Pick words wisely. To bring this to life, I would love all of you to think of one number between 1 and 6. So quickly think of that number between 1 and 6. Got it? I'm going to click on, and you're going to see that there's some different colored squares associated with your number. And when I say your number, just say the color of the square. Okay, it's not a trick. I just want you to say the color of the square. So, here they are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, brownie black. So, sometimes Yellow is just yellow, green is just green. But there are some companies, some industries that have created amazing things by just getting a little bit more creative with the language that they use to describe things. Think about the paint industry. These are all greens up here, but they've been able to build $1 billion business by saying things such as seaweed over here, and cat's eyes, and Amazon moss. Another industry that's quite similar to this is nail varnish or nail polish. Has anyone got an interesting shade on at the moment? What is that one? Coral reef down here. Would anyone like to take a guess what color you think coral reef is? Peachy color. Could you hold them up? It's blue, actually. It's not a peachy color down here. It's a blue. Who would have thought of that? So think about how we can get creative with language just to inspire us to think differently. There's a great example near Dan's apartment, and it's this. Oh, sorry. One thing before we get on to Dan's apartment is let's revisit these 1 to 6. And now let's all think about having the same color. What are some other creative ways of describing yellow, channeling our inner sort of paint industry experts? So turn to your partner, just 10 seconds. How would we describe yellow without using the word yellow? Okay, so wrap it up. Has anyone got a great answer? A great answer? Always down the front. What have you got? Sunshine yellow down here, right at the back over there. Sorry?
Lemon.
Lemon chick. I combined two there. Any others that you want to shout? Spring chicken over there. So you can see very quickly. What? Banana yellow down here. Okay, that's the last one. You can see very quickly, with just a little bit of creativity, we've been able to transform it from just boring yellow into something more exciting. Now, as I was mentioning, there's a great example of this near Dan's apartment. So not many people get excited about going to the dentist, do they?
Especially kids.
Especially kids. So they don't have a dentist near Dan. They have a tooth fairy studio. So that works once for kids. It probably doesn't work a second time, but the Tooth Fairy Studio. It's just a way that they've got creative with describing what they do. Now imagine we were going to open a new business. And I told you that the business I really wanted to get into was car washes. So we're going to open a new business that's a car wash. Now when you hear those words and you start thinking about ideas for car washes, the chances are those words lead to these kinds of images in your minds. Pretty typical stuff. But if I wanted you to think differently about this business venture, I could describe it not as a car wash, but as an auto spa. Suddenly the word spa leads us to fill our heads with other kinds of images, such as these. Now, we're not necessarily saying that these are the answers, that we're going to start putting hot rocks on top of cars. That will probably damage them, but it's just giving us fresh inspiration, something that will take us to new and different places.
So we are going to go backwards now before we can go any further forwards. And we're going to do that by returning to the quiz that we set earlier, the quiz about us. We asked you these 3 questions, and we had some very, very interesting answers. I am a fish and chip eating Prius driver. I also like a lot of salad, I think. Now, what's interesting is some of you didn't have any answers earlier. We had barely met, and there was just no way you could answer the question. Others of you did have answers right away. But for those of you who didn't have an answer, you may well have one now. You know, we've been hanging out for half an hour. You've got a bit more information about us. Who knows? We did warn you, however, that the answers are not very interesting. We're going to tell you them to satisfy your curiosity, but not because we think they're very interesting. So, Gareth, what car do you drive?
A Jeep.
Drives a Jeep. Woo! I do not drive a car. We don't have a car. We are about to buy a car. We're going to buy a Subaru. Subaru in England, Subaru in America, Subaru in Canada, Subaru in New Zealand. Who knows why? Anyway, next thing. What is your favorite food, Gareth?
My favorite food is curry.
curry, which is a very typically British thing. Our greatest national dish is Indian food. My favorite food is steak. I absolutely love a steak. Anything with a bone in it. All right. And Dad, what did your dad do?
My dad was an art teacher for about 35 years.
Yeah. Wait for it. My dad was an HR leader. That's right. Worked in human resources.
/ dictator.
Yeah. Told you it wasn't very interesting. Yeah, that's a kind of a dictator, isn't it? You people work like this, don't work like this. Anyway, it's not interesting. What is interesting is the fact that some of you had answers right away. We just walked straight out. We moved you, and we said, let's do a quiz. And out it came, right away. Prius, thingy, this, that, the other. Why is that? How come we can answer these questions without knowing each other? Well, it's because we make assumptions. This is how we learn and grow. We make assumptions. We join dots for ourselves. And it's a good job we do this. It's a good job we do this because these are the building blocks of learning. These are the building blocks of exploration. We have to make assumptions and figure things out for ourselves. Now, sometimes those assumptions are right. Sometimes those assumptions are wrong. What we want to focus on now is what's going on up there and what does this mean for entrepreneurs. This man is Edward de Bono. Edward de Bono has done a lot of writing and thinking about thinking. And he coined the phrase lateral thinking. And he said that our minds are like mountains. He said our minds are like mountains. I want you to imagine this now. Mind is like a mountain, a beautiful, majestic mountain. And the information goes onto your mountain in the form of drops of rain. So one drop of rain for every bit of information, every data point, every experience that you ever gather. Now, our brains are self-organizing. Our brains file information where other information like that lives. It's very, very organized, very, very neat. You have a file on Gareth, you have a file on me right now. Tiny, not much in there, but it's there. Now, what that means for this analogy is that information starts gathering together. Oh, this information goes here. This is all the information about this. This is all the information about... Your brain's just sorting all the time. Sorting. And these little pools of information start forming that are all around one subject. Now, the more information and experiences you get around a thing, those pools eventually turn into streams. We'll call these streams of recognition. This is knowledge. This is knowing something about a thing. And we have millions of these streams of recognition literally etching into our brains. The more information and experiences and knowledge that you gather around a thing, the bigger the stream. So eventually what happens in our minds is we get what Edward de Bono calls rivers of thinking. And a river of thinking is a creative way of describing deep knowledge and expertise. It's when you know a lot about something. And you can imagine the people we work with at Disney and Pfizer and Four Seasons and the Hershey Company have vast, deep rivers of thinking about their work. There is nothing they don't know about their work. And 90% of the time, that is a really good thing because they're paid to be an expert. They're paid to know. The challenge is when someone says to them, we need you to think in new ways about your work. That's when it gets hard, because rivers of thinking are wide, and they are deep, and they are fast-flowing. And it can be very difficult to get people to change their minds about a thing when there's that much information. You have zero information about me and Gareth right now. Put your hands like this, please. Everyone put their hands like this. Using your hands, how big is your river of thinking about Gareth or Dan from Rise? It's tiny, isn't it? You know nothing about us. So if we gave you a fresh way of thinking about us, you wouldn't go, no, don't believe that. I've got a fixed way of thinking about you. You go, okay, fine, whatever, who cares? It's a new information. But there are things you do know a lot about. Friends you've had all your life. Family members you've had all your life. Hobbies you've had. Things you're studying now, and you are developing rivers of thinking. And 90% of the time, those rivers of thinking are good. However, they can lead to fixed thinking. And one of the easiest ways of getting into a river of thinking is words. And that's why picking words wisely is important, because normal words give you normal connections. Typical words give you typical connections. The great news is, if words get us into our rivers, words can take us out. And we saw this earlier with the difference between car wash, where all we're thinking about is car washes, and auto spa, where we're thinking slightly broader about our challenge. Now, we're going to leave words here, but we're going to carry on talking about this important topic of rivers of thinking.
Great. So, our next stop on our journey is about asking where else. Now, in life, we are told not to steal. When it comes to being entrepreneurs, we think stealing is actually a really good thing. So we're not talking about industrial espionage or patent infringement or anything, but this is all about not feeling like you have to start from scratch. It's about opening your eyes to where else in the world can I gather some inspiration and pull it back to my challenge. Now, this has been going on for a very long time in many different industries. One example is this: just do it. Who knows this phrase? It's one of the most iconic advertising phrases in history. And it popped into the mind of Dan Wyden when Nike wanted something that would inspire people to take up exercise. Just do it. And what he did was he didn't stay in his river of thinking about merchandising sportswear. He didn't look at what Adidas were doing or the other manufacturers. He went to a completely different river for inspiration. And he was inspired by this man. This man was Gary Gilmore. He was a mass murderer. And his final words, when he was asked, "Do you have anything left to say?" was this: "Let's do it. Let's do it." So, a famous, iconic advertising tagline inspired by the final words of a mass murderer. Bit unpleasant, that one, so let's go for a nicer one over here. So, who here has ever been to an IKEA? Anyone ever been to an IKEA? So you do get lost down here, and what happens is you end up wandering around the showroom, and you feel like you're breaking the law if you want to go back. They herd you around a certain way. You end up going through cupboards, worrying that you're going to end up in Narnia or things like that. And the truth of the matter is, this was inspired not by other furniture shops. It was inspired when the founder of IKEA, whose name I will not try and butcher right now, he went to New York. And there was one building that he fell in love with because of its unique design. And the thing that blew him away was because of this unique design, everyone who visited saw everything, which got him thinking, how can I apply that principle back to what I do at IKEA? Does anyone know what this unique building might have been? A unique layout where you have to see everything. It's the Guggenheim over here. And what's interesting to note is that he didn't say, let's just build a spiral in our shops. He took the principle and applied it back. How can I make sure people see everything in my stores? And that's why IKEA has such a frustrating showroom layout. Now, there's the world of nature as well. Tons of inspiration can be gathered from nature. It's a whole field called biomimicry. You know, we have ice picks inspired by the beaks of woodpeckers, cars inspired by armadillos, and trains that have been inspired by kingfishers. To use this technique, really what it boils down to is identifying the essence of what you're trying to do. So if we take that last example, over in Japan, they had the bullet train. They were trying to make the fastest train on the planet, but there were some issues. Because when it got to a certain speed, there was a massive bang and a pop, and a lot of energy went into that as it went through the sound barrier. So they asked themselves, how can we reduce the sonic boom? What's the essence? What's really behind this challenge? And they felt the challenge was this. The essence of it was, what are things that move with minimal friction? If you stay with the challenge at the top about the world's fastest train, you're just going to look at other fast trains to see what they do. When you ask this down here, when you identify your challenge, suddenly the world opens up, and they went to the world of nature and the way that kingfishers can dive into water at great speeds and not cause a splash. And that's why these trains now have such a distinctive front. So, identify the essence and steal with glee. This is exactly what Larry and Sergey did when they founded Google. You know, if you think about it, back in the day, there was no one else they could actually steal from when they were coming up with Google. They got inspiration from a different river, and that was academia. You know, the inspiration for the initial algorithm behind Google came from the citations of academic papers. Who would have thought that something we use every day was inspired by something that goes back, over about 100 years that technique has been used? So, this is what we mean by asking where else? Where else can we go to lift ourselves out of our river and pull it back into our challenge. So we're going to apply it to our challenge over here. So earlier, you came up with a challenge. You played around. You asked why. You asked how. Now just a minute to play around with it by thinking, what's the essence of your challenge? What are you really trying to do? And where could you go for some inspiration? We'll put some music on, and you have a minute to do that.
Good? All right. Righto. So, there's inspiration everywhere. If you cut to the chase of what you're really trying to do, you'll find that someone else in the world is already mastering it. Someone else has already solved it. And there are principles, technologies, ideas that you can borrow and add in, as all those examples show us. And this is a classic way that entrepreneurs make ideas happen, by borrowing brilliance from elsewhere. Another way they do it, which is a completely different way of getting out of your river, is by asking what if. So asking where else is about getting out of your river of thinking and jumping into someone else's for a while. Let's get out of the river of trains and get into the river of kingfishers. And then we'll return to trains and make trains better thanks to kingfishers. But this is different. This is about asking a question that's so provocative, it makes you think in a way that falls outside the river of thinking. And people have been doing this throughout history. What if we could fly? What if we could talk to people on the other side of the world? What if we could heat food up in seconds? Chuck Yeager, famous American who broke the sound barrier for the first time, the first man to do that, said rules are only there for people that can't be bothered to make up their own. You know, entrepreneurs are typically people who say, I get those are the rules, I get it, and I respect that, but what if it was different? And the way you do that is by asking, what if? This man's he's made his life's work about asking what if. What if being green was sexy? There's a Prius. Who knew when you said Prius earlier? What if being green was sexy? Compare a Prius to a Tesla. Provocative question. People didn't used to think you could have green and sexy, but now you can. What if we gave away our patents? He gives away all his patents. That is amazing. What a provocation that is. Because immense commercial value lies in patents. People protect that stuff furiously because that's where they get their livelihood from. And he said, I get that, and I see why people do it, but I think the world would be a better place if we gave our information away. What a huge provocation that challenges the deepest rivers of thinking about what we do with patents. And then there's this. What if our rockets could be used more than once? Now, he's doing this, Jeff Bezos is doing this. Let's get those rockets back. You know, and they haven't cracked it yet, but they will. They will. Now, it's easy because of these examples to think that technology is what enables rule changing. And of course it does. And it would be easy to think that we're living in the world of disruption and it's all thanks to technology. But take a look at these disruptions. These weren't created by new technologies. These were created by people saying, well, what if we did it a different way? What if we did it a different way? So, how do you do it? Well, we're going to have a play around now by reinventing schools. The thing is, some people just need the invitation. They just need permission. They just need to know all they have to do is ask what if. And you could probably reinvent schools without using this technique. The point of using these techniques is to help your ideas be as big and as stretchy as people like Elon Musk's. So what you do is this. The first thing you do is you list out the rules surrounding your challenge. And when we say rules, we mean not specific to one school or one situation, but true to every school in the land. Rules as fundamental as there's a roof, there's something to sit on. Really fundamental stuff. So we'd like you now to turn to someone next to you and come up with 3 rules that are universal. What do all schools have in common? 30 seconds, over to you.
What, we're going to have to cut. We're going to have to cut. So what should we cut? Behavior more forward than this.
Yeah. We can just click through them. So, only tell one story. Right. Just tell basketball. And then do the basketball and the challenge. Because then they're doing stuff.
Okay, watch out. I don't
Do
think
the perseverance
we
challenge.
could just cut this one. Cut this.
Yeah.
So just go straight into the quote. Yeah.
Okay, all right, it's easy, isn't it? It's easy to think of the rules. Here are some we thought of earlier. They are no better or worse than yours. You go to it. It doesn't come to you. You go to it. There are teachers there. It's pretty fundamental. There are set start and finish times. You know, you get to go home. You get homework. These are fundamental. This is true to every school, right? And of course, at the end, it's for learning. That's what it's for. That's a rule. Schools are for learning. So that's the first thing. And often, this is all people need. They just need to take a step back and say, what are the rules of the situation? And it starts getting them thinking about, well, do these rules have to be the case? Some of them do, some of them don't. Some of them can't be played with, some of them can. But listing them out is a great way of getting started. Then, if you need any help getting creative with this, you pick one rule. So we're going to pick, there are teachers, and you rewrite that rule. You rewrite it. So we came up with some earlier. What if there were no teachers? What would that actually look like? What if the students were teachers? What if teachers never spoke? What if teachers weren't human? What if there was one teacher for every student? You just write a new rule. You're not worrying about if it makes sense or doesn't make sense. You're just writing a new rule, and then you start using that as stimulus. And you ask yourself, well, what kind of idea could we have that would make that rule a reality? What kind of schools can we think of where that idea would be, that new rule would be in place? So, over to you. You've got 1 minute now to use the stimulus. Either these rules on the left here or these new rules on the right here. We want you to think about a way you can reinvent schools by breaking the current rules of how schools operate. You've got 1 minute to come up with some ideas. Over to you. Don't do embrace constraints. It's 51 now. We could
Maybe it could.
just do embrace constraints and the perseverance quiz. Right. So,
Okay.
what do you think?
I quickly would, like reality TV, as you can see, was inspired by constraints. They didn't have any. Yeah, we can go for it. We'll be a little bit late.
Yeah. Should we? Okay. You see how easy it is. This is the idea behind all of these techniques is just to stimulate your brain to think in new and different ways. And breaking the rules and rewriting the rules is one of the most fundamental ways of doing that. So, we've talked about escaping your rivers by asking where else. We've talked about escaping your rivers by asking what if. We've just got a couple more things we want to get into now.
What we want to talk about now is embracing constraints. So embracing constraints, because we actually think creativity thrives with constraints. So with the people you were just talking with, I'm going to give you 20 seconds, and I want you to come up with an idea that's worth $10 million, okay? 20 seconds, a $10 million idea. On your marks, get set, go. 15 seconds left. 10, 9, 8,
So are you,
7,
you're just going to close us out.
6, what?
You're just going to close us out. We're going to close us out. Yeah. Right.
2, 1, and stop. Now, I want you to do that exercise again. Still 20 seconds, but this time, think about something you enjoyed doing when you were younger that you could sell to people who are much, much older. So put a spin on it that would make it more appealing to people who are much, much older. So still a $10 million idea. You have 20 seconds. On your marks, get set, go.
One of my favorite ever ones of this was, I'll tell you later.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Stop. By a show of hands, who found it easier to have an idea the second time? Yeah. What about the first time? Okay, so a mix here. When we do this, we often see that it's actually the second time where people feel that they have better ideas. Because the first time, there's no rules. And sometimes it's hard to know how to get started. But by putting in a few constraints, suddenly it unlocks your creativity. It sounds counterintuitive, but there are many great examples out there of things that were inspired by constraints. You know, basketball was invented by a man, James Naismith, because he was set a challenge to come up with something to do in the winter, indoors, with some kids that were very rowdy. And he invented the spirit of basketball. For those of you who love reality TV, that was inspired because of the writers' strike. The producers didn't have any scripts, they didn't have any actors, so they said, why don't we film real people? And that's how they got around the strikes. And now all these shows are thanks to that writers' strike back in the 80s. You know, Ben and Jerry's, you know, they really wanted to make bagels to start off with. That was their original business, was bagels. But when they looked at it, it was too expensive, so they chose something much cheaper and simpler to make, and that was ice cream. So it's amazing how you can unlock your creativity by embracing constraints.
To me. So, last thing we want to talk about very quickly is the importance of keeping moving. Because if you follow this like a process, you start by asking the right questions. That's the best place to start. You then get out of your rivers of thinking, using what if, where else, picking words wisely. You develop bigger ideas. At some point, you're going to want to make your ideas happen. And that's where your ability to keep moving comes in. Here's a quick challenge for you. 60 seconds challenge. Make yourself into teams of 3 or 4. And your challenge for 60 seconds is this. Write down or just list out in your heads as many movies you can think of that are franchises, movies that had prequels or sequels. Your time starts now. Go. It's just good for energy, isn't it? It's good for energy. You behave brilliantly. We'll do the perseverance quiz. We'll finish. Okay, time is up. It was a Rise minute. There are 37 seconds in a Rise minute. Hands up if you think you won. Who thinks they won? Who thinks they got the most? Hands up, hands up, hands up. Great. Give yourselves a pat on the back. We're not going to find out who won. We don't mind who won. It's just a game, a silly game. It's not about winning. What matters is how you went about that. Can you imagine if we'd set this challenge at the start of our session and said, just work on this and we'll check back in an hour? Can you imagine how your energy levels would have changed? There is no way you would have been excited about it as you were just then. There is no way your passion and your energy would have been the same if we'd said you've got an hour, or if we said you've got a week. Sure, you would have got more movies, but your movies per minute would have gone way down. and your interest in the challenge would have gone way down, which goes to show us how momentum is so key when it comes to energizing ourselves and getting passionate and excited about something. And if you want to be an entrepreneur or think like an entrepreneur and make new things happen in the world, you have to have passion and energy because you're trying to do new things. And most of the world wants you to do old things. It wants you to stay in the status quo. So you can't have day-to-day energy. You can't have normal, oh, everything's okay energy. You've got to be excited. You've got to be motivated, and it comes from momentum. Steve Jobs saw it very similarly, but he added a twist on it. He said it's actually about perseverance. It's about keeping going. So to finish, we're going to end now with the world-famous Rise Perseverance Quiz.
So, get ready to shout out your answers. Lady Gaga was with her first record label for how many months before she got fired? 3 months with Deaf Island Records, I think, before she got fired. Can you imagine the humiliation? You tell all your friends you finally have a record deal. You could easily have given up, but she didn't. What about Henry Ford? How many times did Henry Ford go bankrupt before hitting it big with the Model T? Yeah, 5 times. And for a bonus point, does anyone know why it's called the Model T? It didn't look like a T-Rex. It was because these were all the other models that he created. It was only when he got to the letter T that he hit it out the park. Now, James Dyson, the inventor of the vacuumless suction cleaner, the bagless suction cleaner, how many prototypes did he make? And it's not 10, it's a lot. They use it in their advertising. It's actually 5,127 prototypes to invent that revolutionary new vacuum cleaner. What about Albert Einstein? What age was he when he learned to sort of read and write? He was 7. Akio Morita is the founder of Sony, the people who bought us the Walkman. His first thing he ever made was a rice cooker. How many did he make? 40. He made and sold 100. That was it. Imagine telling your wife, you know this great idea I have for an electronics business? It's a failure. It's very easy to give up. And then finally down here, you know, Mr. Kentucky himself, how many doors did he knock on to try and sell his special recipe? It wasn't 1, it wasn't 300. This is a massive number. It's 1,009 restaurants he went to before someone finally said to him, I will buy that recipe. So, this is it for now. You can see that there is one bit left. Behave brilliantly. We've kept that up there as our teaser for our flash classes that we'll be doing during lunch.